And the only thing I knew about it, one, that it was free, which was very necessary for me to do, and that they took you away for the summer to San Diego. And I'm like, well, I want to go there. Prior to that, all of my summers before that were spent in Rosarito with my grandmother. I would spend a month every summer since I can remember at my grandparents' house in Rosarito. So I was working out there. So when I joined Upward Bound, that was the first summer where we had to do summer residential programs that they would pay for. And my first summer was at UC San Diego.
Welcome to the My SGV podcast. Our mission is to capture and share the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. We believe our diversity is what makes the SGV great. And no matter where you're from in the San Gabriel Valley, you will feel welcome.
All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the My SGV podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, we bring you the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. And if you are a returning listener, thank you for spending this time with us. If you're watching online, you'll notice that it's me in a different chair. Scott is not with us today, so I'll have to hold the show on my own. But Victoria and I will be okay. I was thinking of a story that relates to our guest, and one of the things that came to mind was it was probably October of my senior year, and I was 16, and I watched all the movies, and I was like, my mom's got money for me to go to college, and I shared that with her, and she looked at me like I was joking. She's like, no, there's no money for you to go to college. You're gonna have to work. She just said it just like that, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a surprise. And my brother once contrasted us in this way. He said, if you and I are going on the same destination, I'll be derailed if I step on a tack, and you'll still get there if both your arms and legs are blown off. And so, like, when I heard that, I was like, okay, just find another way. And the military seemed to be one of the ways that I can afford to go to college. And so I talked to recruiters, found the best one, the most money. And one day I was like, Mom, my friends are going to come over for dinner. Is that okay? And she's like, yeah. And then these two recruiters in dress green uniforms show up, and she has no idea of what's going on. And she's like, wow. And they're like, well, this is how your son's going to pay for college. And that's how I went. But I wish that there were more people in my life who could have helped me or shown me a different way. I don't regret figuring out on my own, but that was what I had to do. And I understand that there's so much more out there to help kids go to school. And we're going to learn about that today. But before we get into that, thank you to Paris Baguette for sponsoring the show and bringing the delicious treats and refreshments for our guests to take home. So you'll have that to look forward to. Thank you, Paris Baguette. Go check them out in San Gabriel on Las Tunas Boulevard. Well, that brings us to today's guest. Today we have a lifelong San Gabriel Valley resident and Baldwin Park High alumna. She studied at Georgetown University, spent time abroad in Salamanca, Spain, and now directs the Harvey Mudd College Upward Bound program, helping 145 SGV high school students annually reach top colleges. She helped her daughter to start the Cozy Collection, aiding over 25,000 homeless with socks and blankets in the San Gabriel Valley and the Inland Empire. She enjoys reading, kickboxing, knitting, cooking, and is a proud mother to Maya and Joaquin, celebrating nearly 17 years of marriage to her husband, Carlos, who is a guest on this show. Join me in welcoming one of our own, Angie Covarrubias Aguilar. Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here, especially when I heard of what you do. So can you just quickly summarize what that program is, and then we'll get into it in detail later?
For sure. So I've been working with the Harvey Mudd College Upward Bound program now for over 2 decades. It's a program that's a federally funded program designed to help low-income, first-generation high school students who want to go to college but may not have the information, develop the academic skills and the motivation necessary for success in a 4-year college.
Wow. And as I understand, you were a participant in this.
Yes, so my first obvious encounter with Upward Bound was as a student in Baldwin Park. And so I oddly enough, back in the 90s when they were doing it, recruitment was a little different. So you were supposed to be invited to go to listen to an information about Upward Bound. But I saw people around me getting notices, and I'm like, what is that? I don't know anything. And they're like, it's a free program. You get to go to San Diego for the summer. I'm like, why was I not invited? So I went to my counselor and said, I want to go to this meeting. And she was like, sure, go to the meeting. And so I applied, I got interviewed, I got in. And so my main thing was I want to go to college, but don't know how to do it. I don't know anything about colleges. I had never stepped foot on a college campus. And of course, being from Southern California, you hear USC, UCLA, great schools. But I didn't know how to apply, how do I pay for it? I didn't know any of that. And so it's funny enough, at one point I'm like, well, I'll enlist. Like, that's what we feel. Those are our options, right? Especially when my mom was, she worked hard, but did not make enough. And so Upward Bound became kind of like my GPS through the college process and opened up opportunities I never even could imagine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get more into that, but let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
What is your connection to the San Gabriel Valley? I know I mentioned that you're a lifelong resident, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, when I was young, we moved around a lot. And it was, I think, the San Gabriel Valley when I first felt like it was my stable home, and it was Baldwin Park. But oddly enough, I found out later that when I was born, we lived in El Monte for a little bit. And I was even baptized in Epiphany, which is a church, a local church where a lot of our students do all their catechism and they attend. So that was interesting, but I only learned that years later. But I felt like I grew up and lived for the most time in Baldwin Park, which, is, according to them, the hub of the San Gabriel Valley is what it says on their on their posters. So I went to Baldwin Park High School and grew up there. And now I live in the San Gabriel Valley as well. What
was life like growing up in Baldwin Park?
It was, when you look back, people are like, oh, Baldwin Park in the 90s, what is that? But when you live it, you don't see it, right? That's just normal. And it was fine for me, maybe because I was a girl and I was the oldest, so there were certain restrictions I had. But I went to middle school and to high school in Baldwin Park, even though we moved right before my senior year, closer to Nogales High School, I still committed to staying at Baldwin Park. So I would wake up, take the bus, and then walk 20 minutes after the bus just to go to Baldwin Park because I wanted to finish where I started. Yeah.
Baldwin Park followers on our social media are going to be happy that they finally have someone, a representative from their area. So when you say, my idea of Baldwin Park is that I'm unfamiliar because I don't really go there, not as a destination point. Like, people may go to different areas because there's something that anchors them, a restaurant or some sort of entertainment. But I never really went to Baldwin Park because of that. Is that sort of true, that it's not a place where people would go to? Or
I mean, I think it's a place, for me, it was a place where I grew up and was home, right? That was my destination. That was my first thing. I oddly enough still dream of the house we rented there. But it was a place where I met friends, where I felt like it was the first time, because we moved around a lot, where I kind of remember. That's why I say that's where I grew up. So I don't know if people normally go there. I know there's a King Taco that people frequent, but
and I think the original In-N-Out is in Baldwin Park.
Yes. So, there are some destinations.
And so you grew up there, and you first heard of this program by chance.
Totally by chance. And the only thing I knew about it, one, that it was free, which was very necessary for me to do, and that they took you away for the summer to San Diego. And I'm like, well, I want to go there. Prior to that, all of my summers before that were spent in Rosarito with my grandmother. I would spend a month every summer since I can remember at my grandparents' house in Rosarito. So I was working out there. So when I joined Upward Bound, that was the first summer where we had to do summer residential programs that they would pay for. And my first summer was at UC San Diego because at that point I wanted to be a doctor. Much like a lot of first generation students where we're pigeonholed to maybe sometimes a couple, like what success looks like, and a doctor seems like that's a good success. And so I went out there because we were taking 2 classes and then they would give us an internship. And so I was hoping to have an internship at a hospital, but then they put me at the supercomputer center in like media relations. So it was nothing hospital related, and I was so jealous of my peers who were like in the morgue at the hospital or doing all these things with patients. And so that was my first summer. My second, and it's an academic year-round program. So during the academic year, we have Saturday programs and college planning and tutoring and advising and all the stuff that comes with colleges or preparing for college. But in the summer, we have like academic boot camp. It is very much like academic boot camp. And so the second summer, they flew 14 of us, rising seniors, high school seniors, to Georgetown. And that's when first time I got on a plane, first time I was on the East Coast, without my parents, obviously. And we stayed for 5 weeks on the Georgetown campus and had daily internships and classes. And I interned once again in like Health and Human Services with, at that point, Secretary Shalala's speech writing office, right? And so again, I was in this speech writing kind of office, nothing to do with medicine, but I fell in love with the East Coast and the opportunities that college, what world outside of Baldwin Park looked like, right? And the different possibilities.
Are you of Mexican descent?
I am.
And you're first generation here?
Yes.
The stories that I've heard from people of Mexican descent being the first generation here were often that education wasn't like real high in their family. They were, moved or pushed to work very soon to help with the family. It sounds like that might have been different in your family.
Yeah, that's not my experience. My mom was here. My mom and dad divorced at an early age. And when I was like 2 months old or something like that. So my mom really raised me as a single mother. She was undocumented for many years. And so she worked a lot of factory jobs that didn't really make ends meet, hence the moving around a lot. And so when it was her and I for a long time, before my brother and sister came along, it was, look, education, I think, is the way you need to be. I think you need to go to school. I didn't have that opportunity. It wasn't something that was really a focus for her when she was a girl in Mexico. And so for me, that was always like, hey, you're going to have a better life if you go to school. That's as much as I can give you, and I'll motivate you. She can't help me, but she can motivate me on that path. And that's a story that I hear a lot from our parents now. Like, it's about, we want them not to work so that they can have a better life, whatever that means for them. They can succeed and have different opportunities afforded to them. So I really do see, I don't feel like my story is very different, because I feel like I there's so many students that I work with whose stories are very extraordinary. And it feels very normal to me, right?
Getting to travel to Georgetown and spend that much time there sounds really exciting.
Yes, scary, exciting, and again, it's we still do it now for our students, and so it's like academic boot camp. Now with phones, they can't use their phones. It's all about developing themselves academically, seeing opportunities that maybe when we think as first generation, we think college, we feel it's very an abstract term, whatever we see on TV, right? And it's nothing like that. And so trying to get them to envision like staying on a campus, not just for a day, but here you are for 4 or 5 weeks, living in this community of scholars who all want the same goals. Maybe they started different, but everyone wants to go to college. Building a community is really, really important. And I think it's really impactful. We've started this partnership with Georgetown. I want to say the director, 2 directors before me started in the 90s, and we've had over 45 students go and graduate from Georgetown because of this introduction. So people from Almani, South Almani, thinking, oh, maybe I can go 4 years out to Georgetown and see what that's like. So it's been really impactful, I think.
It must have been eye-opening to come from Baldwin Park and go on your first plane trip and then go to a university and spend so much time there. How did that change your view of like the world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever gone to Georgetown, but East Coast colleges look so different than West Coast colleges. And so as a, high school senior, you're like, what castle world am I in? And you feel really safe because you're doing it with the group of staff members and students that you're comfortable with from your area. And I think it felt really great in that moment to say, like, I can do this. This is something that I've been preparing to do. But it wasn't until I got to Georgetown where I felt a little culture shift. Oh. And of course, I must say, it was pre-cell phone, I didn't have a computer, none of this. And I was the only person at that time from my program to attend that year to Georgetown. So I felt like I was navigating this really unfamiliar world, whereas in Baldwin Park, I was the typical student where you get good grades. It was easy. I had a big head, and I'm like, if I do this, I'll be fine at Georgetown. And then when I get to Georgetown, I'm like, this is not my world. I am no longer the big fish. Mm-hmm. I am, among all these people who have had all these different life experiences than I have had. And really trying to figure out, not only, took out loans for sure, but trying to figure out what success meant for me. What does it look like now? And what am I going to do with it? And so in the first couple years, for sure, my experience was let me survive this, because it was such a different academically and culturally place than I was used to. But, now looking back, it was very formative. And so my goal for our students is I don't want them to go through these colleges and just try to have the end goal as graduation. I want them to really thrive in their environment and make it their own, and not take as long as maybe I did to feel like, oh yeah, this is my spot, right?
What's the demographics there look like?
I don't know what they are now.
Or when you were attending?
But I think when I was there was 6 or 7% probably Latino students. So there weren't many of us, and we formed a community, right? And then when you factor in West Coast people, there was a West Coast, East Coast kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. But the majority affluent community, mostly white students when I was there.
What was one of the challenges to, feel comfortable there or feel that you belonged or fit in there?
I think for me, it was mostly, I realized, how poor I really was growing up, right? We made do, and everyone seemed about the same. But when I got there, I realized, no, I am poor. I'm a poor student, and not just those struggling college students, but you're a poor student, knowing the things I worried about didn't seem to be outside what things people worried about outside of the community, right? Whether it was how many times can I go home, or how many times can I call home? Because back then it was a calling card that you had to punch in, and it's expensive to call California. So I was working. I had to work every year, but I was working and paying off my phone bill is basically what I was doing. So we had to kind of temper how many times I called home. Or what I did for Easter break when the campus closed, because it's a Catholic university, or spring break, right, while other people are out doing their thing. So I think knowing that I was in a disadvantage economically was a realization, right, that I was like, oh, all right, that's another barrier that I didn't know I had to deal with. So I got there with a suitcase and probably $40. And the suitcase was a weird packing of I might need this. Maybe I should take a plate. It was a weird packing list. And then I had a roommate my first year from New Jersey who came with the U-Haul. She had the fridge. She had the microwave, the TV, right? Like,
Oh, then that benefited you, though.
it did, but her parents came to drop her off, and she's like, "When do you want to like go like half on a rug?" And I'm like, "I don't know how much this is gonna cost," like, right? And so my mom never even went to Georgetown until I graduated. So it was just like, okay, have fun. So do your thing. So I think they trusted me because I was very independent at that point. But there were moments when I got homesick, and I couldn't really display that to my parents at home.
That you were homesick?
Yeah, that I was homesick, or like if I was struggling academically initially, like that's not something that I shared. It was something that I had to like, well, I have to figure it out. I have to figure it out on my own. Like money-wise, I never told them about money-wise or what I had or didn't have. So.
Wow. How would you rate the overall experience there? Would you have done it again?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I, especially now, right? Like even when my students get in and we're like, okay, let's talk about all these differences, but let's talk about all these opportunities. I think I'm super proud that Georgetown has done so much over a decade in really putting in the resources and opportunities for first generation students. So like, I feel like my students that go there, they're taken care of, and their purpose is to succeed and not be hindered by some of the financial obstacles that lay in your head and prevent you from really focusing on the things that you need to do, right? And so aside from, yes, I have to get good grades and figure out how to adapt and study, I also have to figure out how to pay all these bills, or, oh, I have to work all this day instead of studying, right? Like, Georgetown has provided so much support to our students, and they want to eliminate that barrier for them. So it's great. So yeah, I would definitely do it again.
So Upward Bound made this huge impact on you and your life, and you've been working with them, or when did you go back to work for them?
Well, as an undergrad, there were 2 summers that I went back for these summer programs. So we have all these different summer programs for students at different levels in different places. And so we have to hire so many people, and we hire people with bachelors and then undergrads to serve as tutors. And so that's how I started. I became a tutor for an English class, and I did 2 summers. That's where I met Carlos, my husband. We were working on he was the instructor and I was the tutor for a class. And so that's my initial first time I worked. And it was funny because I remember senior year, we were on a field trip with the director and other staff members, and we went to Zion National Park. And we were out there, and I would always joke with the director, and I got in the van, and I'm like, I'm going to drive, Jim. Like, I'm driving the van. He's like, when you work for us, you'll drive. And I'm like, yeah, right. Never. And look at me. 20-some years later, I'm still working for the program. But that was my first experience. Then when I graduated from college, senior year, I felt a lot of pressure to get a job. It's like this idea that, or this weird notion that once you graduate from college, everything's going to work out like magic. Like everything's going to unroll. All the offers are going to come. Life is going to be what we said we would, which is going to be great. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of friends who were in the business school, because Georgetown has a business school. And so their job hunting is a little different. And almost everyone around me had a job before graduation. That's the goal. You get a job before graduation. So I was really concerned and anxious about what that meant. I double majored in psychology and English, and I'm like, what did I do? What is this going to afford me? And then I got a job doing communications in DC. I had worked for People magazine before for like a year and a half. And so I got a job in communications, and I felt relief, right? Like, all right, I got a job. What I didn't realize is that it was an assistant job, and I hated it. I immediately, as soon as I graduated, I stayed out in DC, and I hated it, like to the point where I was like, what did I do all this for? Like, this is not what I thought life after a bachelor's would be. Mm-hmm. And so I was really miserable, and I was looking for other jobs and looking for ways to pivot. And after I stopped feeling sorry for myself, because I realized, like, a story that I always tell the students is like, my mom had a job that she had to go to. Like, every day she had to go to a factory that she made peace belts, and she was there on her feet for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if she did overtime, for like 40, 45 years of her life that you have to work, right? And sure, people are like, shit, she can just quit. yeah, but she'd get the same thing, right? Like but I went to school so I could have options, not so that my life can be unrolled. And so once I started feeling sorry for myself a little, I was like, okay, so what do I want? What did I like? I wanted to come back to California. I loved working with students. I loved working with kids. In fact, when I was going to be a doctor for X amount of years in my childhood, it was a pediatrician that I wanted to be. And I remember writing in my essays, the reason behind this is because kids don't have a lot of options. Like, they are pulled around with whatever circumstances. And so I realized, I liked working with students, and magically something opened up here at Upward Bound, like a entry-level position. And the director had reached out to see if I wanted to apply, and I'm like, yes, please. And I was only in DC for about 6-7 months after graduation, and then I started the following year. I came back and started working for Upward Bound, and then have moved up throughout I've had all the positions. I've had all of them.
I see.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that job that you didn't like? You said, what was it about it? Can you share what you didn't like about it? And was there a moment where you're like, I'm going to do something about it, or move on? Yeah.
So I was so happy to have a job. I was just so happy. I felt like a grown up. You have an apartment. You have all these things, and you could tell people, like, finally, like, that dreaded question, what are you going to do after graduation? How's your life different? Right. And so I had this job, and it was a very small department, and it was communications at a hospital. And I think it was also a new department. The person who was in charge, I think she was new to that position as well, right? And so I felt I should have known by my media relation assistant title that I was an assistant. I just didn't know what that meant, right? And so I wasn't doing as much writing as I thought I would be doing, or I felt like I was just seen as someone to answer the phones or balance the budget or whatever it was that I was doing, the ordering and things, without a lot of opportunity. And I would follow procedures, and then I think my supervisor was under a lot of stress. So I think we didn't know how to see eye to eye sometimes. And so I probably burned a lot of bridges by just refusing to do the things that I had to do. And I do remember at one point, though, at a review, it was kind of like, hey, you're really good at math. Like, maybe you should do something with that versus writing. And so that kind of demoralized me a little bit, or I allowed that to hold a lot of weight.
Your supervisor told you that?
My supervisor told me that. And I don't think she meant it. Like, even now, like, I can give a lot of charity because I don't think, or a lot of grace. I don't think she meant it in that way, right? But it came off where, like, what? Right? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And so quickly after that, I started looking for other jobs. But also, when you're first generation college student, you're also going to be first generation career, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't know how to network. You don't know how to do a resume. You don't know how to build connections to get the next step, or you don't know what other careers might be out there. So it really does become your first. You're first, and you have to figure out what to do next. So luckily, though, I think this director still, they stayed in our lives and continued. We continued to have conversations, and I don't think they knew I was looking. It was just something that opened up. And it just magically, that's what I felt like. It was a nice accident. Mm-hmm. I was ready to go at a drop of a dime. Whenever you tell me, I'm there. And that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, I was just curious for myself, and it reinforced that notion that people don't quit jobs, they quit their management oftentimes. Mm. And it sounds like your creative abilities were stifled there, that you were like, people sort of often feel trapped if they're not able to express, or if they just feel like they're pushing buttons and whatnot. So
yeah, and again, I was like 21, 22, in a time where you think you know it all. Like, right? Like, I thought I knew it all at 18, like, looking back, like, you think you know it all at some point. And I had to take some responsibility for, like, there's a lot I didn't know. And so I have to take a lot of ownership for that as well. Yes, it wasn't the best pairing. I'm sure there was a lot of newness, right? And I don't think people sometimes think about the impact of their words. Even though their intent might be good, their impact might be different. So I know at like 22, I'm sure I was not the best employee. So, yeah.
Did you have like fiery conversations with your boss? Were you that kind of person?
No, but when I stopped caring, I was just like, if I was asked to do something, I was like, I didn't do that. I think you should just take care of it on your own. Like, I was just done. I was done. And that was probably not the best thing to do in retrospect.
So then this opportunity just came about with Upward Bound.
Yes.
And you seized on that, and you haven't looked back.
I haven't. I mean, anytime there was times when I was like, okay, I think I'm done, right? I think I need to move on. Because there's only certain positions. Like, there's only 2 other full-time staff members. So it's either you could be assistant director or there's not a lot of movement. And so I had been academic coordinator for, I would say 3 or 4 years, maybe 4 years. And I could do it without any effort any longer. And so there was a time when I was thinking, okay, what's next? What should I do? Should I do grad school? Should I, what other jobs am I interested in? And then something quickly opened up, and then I became assistant director. And then 6 months after that, or something ridiculous, like 6 months or a year, I became director. It's so cyclical that I forgot the years. And then as a director, I feel like there's just a lot of different ways that I can use my creativity so I can develop the program. So whatever I'm interested at that point, I'm like, let me learn more about this. And so there's always different ways to create new workshops, to develop the way I talk to certain students, to learn more about what they need as cohorts change. Because it's not even based on my experience, is too old, right? Like, things change. And so what are these students now confronting that I can help maybe try to set them up for success later? And so I think it's really fun to not only work with students who keep me on my toes, but also to keep thinking of different ways to create some impact. Maybe not now, but somewhere along the way.
I see. Well, Angie, we ask each guest to bring an item with them. What did you bring with you today?
Well, it might be a little cheesy, but I have...
Oh, cheesy's good. We like cheesy.
Yeah. So I have this collection. The most important part of my job is the connections I make with students. And it happens so quickly, I think. The students are in our program for 2 to 3 years, typically 3 years until they graduate from high school. So we get to know them and their families for a really long time. And so we're just always very excited about their growth. But I have a collection of letters and cards that I keep, that when I'm feeling like, oh my God, this job, like I can't do this anymore, it's a reminder of the impact we made, especially when there are times when you can't really feel your impact, or, I have to write a grant to renew this funding, because I have to write it every 4 to 5 years. And so if they score you, it's a competitive grant. So if they score you below the funding level, then you're no longer in existence, right? And so the stress that comes with that, and the different things you have to give up to make other things work, is a lot sometimes. And so it's the students and their words that kind of keep me grounded. And so it's always great to go back to some of these things. And so I keep some of these when I need them for inspiration, or just to look back at some of the impact. So that's what I have.
Wow. Can I see?
Sure.
There's a lot here. Maybe they're like 100 or so.
Yeah, and now I have a email one where, like, when kids send me emails, right? Like, or social media and stuff. And so there's a letter in there from the former director who, when there's only been 4 of us who've ever directed in this program. And this program has been in existence since the early 70s. And so he wrote a nice note. And so sometimes when I'm doubting the next step or what I should do next, I think that helps me remember my why. Yeah.
So your work is not like a mechanic where at the end of the day or at the end of the week, they're like, this thing was broken and now it's fixed and here you go. I can see the results of my work. Sometimes you don't see the results until maybe only the impact on their lives later on.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah. Although I think it's about changing. What is it? What is the reward? Yes, the main reward is that they go to college and then they advance and they get a bachelor's at least, right? But when we work with these students for so long, you see their growth in other areas that are harder to measure, whether it's their confidence, their social emotional skills, like a little bit more, like that something is easier, like they unlock something. And you see it in the way they carry themselves. Our program doesn't have a specific GPA requirement when students apply. So we're not like, you have to have an X amount GPA for you to apply. You want to go to college? You want to try this out? Let's figure it out. And so they apply. And, I've had students from all gamuts of the GPA, but it's about once that interview, like, what are the things that they need? Can we help them? And sometimes one of those criteria is like, hey, I don't know if they'll go to a college without our help, so maybe we should give them a try, right? So it doesn't always work out the way they want it, but the beautiful thing of social media and keeping in contact, or at least seeing a glimpse of their lives, is like, it can take them 10 years, and then you see that they're still holding on to some of these guiding principles that we offer from the first day, which is, it starts from, I love to learn, all the way to, but I'm not alone. Right. And so that's the beautiful thing of this program, is that you make this community, whether you stay in the SGV or go beyond. Like, I've heard back from people who are like, at my college, were like, hey, I ran into someone in DC who knew of this program and knew of the work that you get. Right. So we're just traveling everywhere, and our students are going and doing their thing, however they define success. And so even when they don't, quote unquote, get that bachelor's or associate's degree, I see the success that they've made, and that's great. I'm glad that I was even able to introduce them, or my staff was able to introduce them to something that they maybe didn't know before.
Mm-hmm. Well, Angie, I want to get more into the details of how the program works, what schools you go to, how you introduce the kids to it, but let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sometimes, even the best of us can slip up. That's why the law offices of Scott Wormuth are here to pick you back up again.
And while they strive to get you the biggest compensation possible, oh my gosh!
Their main concern is your health and recovery. They work closely with doctors and insurance companies to make sure you get the proper medical treatment.
Initial consultations are free, so give them a call.
At the law offices of Scott Wormuth, we're with you all the way.
I'm Scott Wormuth. We've been fighting for your rights for more than 40 years.
All right, we're back with Angie. Angie, before the break, we're talking about the actual details of the program, how you execute it and reach the students. But before that, when we come back from the break, we like to ask questions from this deck of cards called Icebreakers. And they're just a little fun way for the audience to get to know us. You can choose to answer it or not. Okay. You want to answer it, Tori?
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. So here we go. Who had the most influence on you growing up?
I would have to say, I would say there's two people. My mother, obviously. I saw how hard she worked. And so it wasn't like we didn't have enough because she didn't work, right? She was giving it her all. And so I think she was really, really charitable with, as a parent, displaying her what she thought were her mistakes or her failures. So as they served as lessons for me. And so I think that just watching her work and watching her life grow up with me, like unfold, I think was really influential with me. And my other one was my grandpa, who, like I said, I spent every summer by myself with my grandparents in their home. And my grandpa they had homes that they rented to, and so he was always fixing things. And so I was always required to help. No matter, I was 4, 5, 6, I was painting fences. And so I was really fixing things, trying to figure out how things worked, and spending that time with my grandma and my grandpa, where she would make me do my laundry. They helped me really be independent, but also do things like problem solve and ways around their property. So
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'll say my brother, my older brother, who I think by sheer force of proximity and time, because I spent the most time, he was in proximity the closest to me, but he probably had the most impact on me Some of them were negative, but you turn those into positive things. So yeah, it was probably my brother.
For me, I would say my mom, just because she raised us and we were homeschooled, so it was a lot of time with her. And then I'd say like later in my teenager years, it was my older sister. After a hard time in the family, she kind of rose up to like being the eldest, and so it's like kind of inspiring seeing her pull herself up, and it kind of like gave me like, oh, I want to be like that, be like her in that way.
You talking about Rebecca?
Abby.
Oh, Abby.
Yeah, after the thing happened with Rebecca.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, for our listening audience, and if you're watching on YouTube, who had the most influence on you growing up? Let us know in the comments, and we'll be sure to share that on a future episode. So, Angie.
Yes.
How do you reach these students? Where are you getting the students from? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, so we work with 4 cities in the San Gabriel Valley and 5 target schools. So we work with El Monte High School, South El Monte High School, Mount View High School, all in the city of South and El Monte and El Monte. And we work with Bassett in La Puente and Gary in Pomona, in the city of Pomona. So what we attempt to do is, I don't want to do it the way it was done for me, where people recommend you and then you kind of chance. So we go to every single freshman English class and tell them a little bit about why they should be thinking about college and what other programs exist and how our program can help them. And then, so we do all the presentations. We send letters in Spanish and English to every single family from 9th graders, telling them there's a free program. This is what we do. And then when students apply, we then do one-on-one interviews at their high schools just to like get to know them, what their needs are, what we feel we can do. And once they're accepted, we have meetings with parents or families and guardians. And then once everyone's on board, they're committed until they graduate essentially from high school to be part of the program. So it's a long process, but we're also a little demanding, right? Like we're asking students to give up 2 of their summers, essentially give up 2 of their summers, but to have all these different experiences that's during the summer, and then during the academic year, 2 to 3 Saturdays a month, we pick them up at their high school really early in the morning, drive them over to Harvey Mud, where they are tutored by Claremont College students. So we hire about 50 Claremont College students to be their tutors for the semester. And then they eat lunch with us and have college planning based on their grade level with one of us. And so, they have to go to school on Saturday with us, and we also take a group of college tutors to their high school once a week to provide additional tutoring. And then we monitor their grades, and we do one-on-one advising or, action plans when they need it or when they're feeling not as motivated. And the entire college process, from applying to colleges to the essays, FAFSA, like all of that with them and their parents. We talk to them about that. So we get to know our families really well. I have families who I've had all their kids in the program. The families have seen me have kids and have a family. So it's a really neat community.
5 schools, every freshman class. What is that, like 2,000 at most?
Yeah, at most. Mm-hmm.
And how many of those actually apply?
So it depends on the year, right? And so the good thing is that all these schools also have a lot of different resources. We're not the only Upward Bound in the nation. There's about 900 Upward Bounds in the nation. And there are a couple Upward Bounds who also serve the same schools that we do. So I think there's a program that can fit students, right? And their needs. So I would say it depends on the year, and we're kind of getting back to COVID here, but we have about 80 students who apply, but we only have about 50 to 55 spots available every year, because only the graduating seniors, when they leave, then we fill those spots. And we're funded for 145 students.
Wow. And what percentage of them who start off as a freshman make it all the way through? I
would say, I don't have the exact number, but I would say the majority of them. I would say more than 85% finish with us.
Oh, that's really good.
Throughout the whole year. the reasons they leave is because they have other commitments or it was just too intense or they moved, right? Sometimes they have other responsibilities, like they work and they just can't commit. But for the majority end up staying.
Well, so you're getting to know them over their whole high school career.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Over their
And
high
their
school
families.
career. And their families. And the beauty is that sometimes when they're undergraduates, a lot of times I hire a lot of people in the summer to run these classes. I hired about 18, 19 people in the summer. And a lot of them are alums, right, that come back because they want to give back to come back and work for our program. So they continue to be part of our program, and they continue to kind of talk a little bit about if they have siblings or cousins. They're like, oh, yeah, my cousin was in the program. So that's kind of neat.
So as the director, you get to craft like sort of their experience in the program?
Yeah, I mean, when I write the grant, I get to determine our structure. And then we, like college planning, I can, if I see that there's a trend coming up or like, how do I help students? So I just love to dive right in and start learning about something and trying different things. We also do all of our courses. We develop all of our courses in-house. We do everything in-house. And so we develop all our courses in-house. So when I was in charge of English curriculum, I was like, I'm going to give them all my books, all the ones I love. I'm going to introduce them to these books, right? And so, yeah, we have a lot of freedom in shaping what our program looks like. There's things we have to do, but within that, there's a lot of freedom in shaping it.
Wow. That sounds really fun. Like you get to, well, maybe it's difficult to see the fruits of your labor until much later on, but how interesting and fun to craft this experience that's truly going to benefit them, you know, not only in college, but like later on in life, like you're really affecting their life's trajectory with
That's
this
the
program.
hope. I know it changed my life. As corny as that sounds, like when I do presentations at these high schools, I'm like, look, this program changed my life. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it really did. It changed. I didn't know Georgetown existed. I couldn't think beyond this little small world that I had, right? And it was limited only because of other people's experiences around me. And so how do we provide this knowledge of a bigger world and different opportunities and things you might not even be aware of? So constantly looking for different partnerships, different opportunities that our students can be involved in, I think is really great. So whatever, that's the most fun I have in my job, is getting to know these students. And that's one of the reasons why, even as director, I haven't really let go of advising a cohort of students. I follow them throughout. And so a lot of, directors are just doing the directing thing, which takes up a lot of time. But I couldn't just do that without really knowing and being in the classroom every single week with that students.
And I know we touched on this when we first talked, but as a mother of two, is there a difference between your, reaching these students from these other schools and trying to reach your own kids and show them this other world and what's available, what's out there?
I really do feel, having kids has changed my approach, right? And like how I relate to students. When I was 22, 23, 24, 20, whatever ages in my 20s, I was like their aunt. I was my students like, oh, like big aunt, like a sister, whatever, right? Like that kind of advice. And then I was like, all right, now I'm like their mom. Now I'm really like their mom. And so any opportunity that I would give my own kid, any advice that I would give my own students is what I want to give these high school students. I just want them to have options and opportunities. And so I do the very same thing for my kids. Is my kids grew up and have grown up around the college, around my students. They are, they come and visit. They see them around. Since I've had some alums who are like, I remember when you were pregnant, or I remember, and now I'm going to have a 15-year-old. Right now, my daughter is the same age as the kids I'm recruiting. So I very much see, like, what would I want my kids to have, and vice versa. Like, what do I love about these students that are making them successful that I can give my kids to? Or what are, like, I do parent workshops with parents on different, like, how to parent college-age students, or how to communicate better with teenagers. So I do different workshops of those as well. But I'm always asking them, like, I love what you've done with your students. How did that happen? What kind of, asking for advice as well, because those are the kind of kids I want my kids to be when I see my students. So they inspire me to be a better parent and have also shaped me, like, of the realities of being a high school student is really hard now. Like, being a high school student is so much more intense than when I was in high school, and there's so much pressure for our high school students. And so it really allows me to see that firsthand and figure out how I can try to minimize some of that pressure for our students, or what it is that our students need based on how I'm parenting or what I'm watching my kids go through.
And I know you only work with these 5 schools, but if you could speak to the students of the San Gabriel Valley, those who are thinking, I really wish I could go to college, but I don't have the resources. I don't know what to do. Maybe it's not for me. What would you say to those students or the parents of those students?
Well, to the students, I would say leave your options open, especially when you're a freshman or when you're a sophomore and you're like, oh, my grades aren't that great. Forget it. I'm not smart. Whatever it is that we tell ourselves or have been told and reinforced through our education, leave it open. Today, you might not want to go to college, but you don't know who you're going to be in 3 years. You don't know where life will take you, and it's better to have options open, and then at that point, with the information you have, you can make a choice versus you allowing life to make that choice for you. So we have to go for what we want and ask questions without feeling embarrassed. And I think in high school, when we're just starting, they're just navigating high school. Like, what is this new world? And we're so used to that people will come to us. Here's the information. Here's the stuff. But that doesn't happen in life. And I think it starts to happen less and less in high school. And so really utilizing the adults around you and the programs to figure out, hey, is there something that can help me? I think this might be a choice. I'm going to put in the work and see what my efforts come out. And for parents, there's a lot of misinformation out about colleges and how much colleges cost. And yes, there's a lot on debt, but there's good debt and there's bad debt. And there's colleges that have money to provide students the support that they need. And so looking at those colleges and, again, allowing students to apply and then figuring out with all the information versus this supposed information, or my neighbor went to college and they didn't even finish and then they have $80,000. Like, right, you hear all these stories, and parents want to set up their kids for success and they want them to be okay. Like, but they don't have all the answers, and that's okay. None of us have all the answers. And so seeking out the information and being an advocate for that is really important in Spanish or English or whatever language, right? Yeah.
Awesome. That's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, Angie, we're going to move on to the final portion of the show where we get to learn a little bit more about what you like in the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay.
So, Angie, this is what we call the SGV3, and we ask you to share your 3 favorite or most memorable places or experiences in the San Gabriel Valley. So, what would be number 1?
Okay, so some of these are good places that no one can go to.
Oh.
Yeah, they're not all. So again, and it's probably predictable. My first one would be that house in Baldwin Park that I lived in on Landis. I think it was Landis Avenue, Landis Street. When I first moved to Baldwin Park, I started 7th grade there. And I don't remember a lot of people before that. Like, my memory on memorizing people and their names is really horrible because I didn't stay long enough in a place to do that. So I moved around so much that I can't remember most of my elementary stuff. So, but that's where it started to solidify. That's why I think it's funny that even this house still shows up in my dreams once in a while, because that was so impactful for me. So I would say that's the first place where I felt like it was home. So when people ask me where you're from, Baldwin Park, that house, once in a while I'll drive by it, see how it is.
Is it still there?
It is, yes. It is still there. I don't remember the exact address, but I know where it is. The second place would have to be, of course, Harvey College, right? Because I was there. I grew up there. 14, 15, that's when I started going. I've seen it changed. I've seen it evolved. I've been there. I've had Carlos proposed at Harvey Mud. I've had it's just the place where I felt belonging. as well. So as you can see, community and belonging are really important to me. And the third place, I would have to say, I really, really, really love the LA Arboretum right here in Arcadia by the Santa Anita racetrack. And oddly enough, we lived in Temple City, and I didn't even think about it when we lived there, when Carlos and I first lived there. But during the pandemic, like most people, we were looking for a way out and accidentally stumbled upon it when we were getting food. And we've been members for a while because it was a place where I felt I can get away and feel like I'm somewhere different and have everything from like meditation to forest bathing. Like, it's been a really great experience and a place where you can feel grounded once again. So those were my 3 recs. Awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Carlos proposed at Harvey Mud, huh?
Yes, he did.
Awesome.
He did after one of my Saturday privately. The students were all gone. Everyone was all gone. But yes, we were going to go on a trip up to San Francisco right after I finished work on a Saturday. And so that's where, before we went on this trip, he proposed on the campus.
Awesome. Well, Angie, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. If people want to get in touch with you or support the program, I don't know that that's something that you want to put out there, but what's a good way to do that?
Yeah, so social media, I'm not huge on it, but, my husband started my public social media, and it's like Big Brown Mom as a thing against him, so, to partner his. So you can reach me at Big Brown Mom. And if you want to learn more about the program, it is on our website. You can just look up Harvey Mud Upward Bound. And there is, of course, anytime you want to donate, you can go ahead and donate. We actually do a yearly, with our alums, fundraiser, and everything goes for scholarships that we give our seniors. So we used to recycle to put money in that. We've done different things, but it all goes to scholarships.
Awesome. And Big Brown Mom, is that on social? Is that
It's on Instagram.
On Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Angie, thank you for coming on the show. We do appreciate it.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Victoria.
Well, there you go. Another episode in the books for you. I hope you enjoyed that. And it's really interesting to see just how much out there is in terms of resources for children and for people interested in going to college. And Angie, you touched on this mindset that we have all these limiting beliefs around school and what it can be in terms of debt and struggle. But it's really nice to know that there are people like you that are out there and educating both parents and students on what's possible for them. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to our show, and don't forget to like, share. And if you want to see our full catalog of episodes, you can always check out our website, mysgv.net. We have our merch available there. There's some behind me. I think there's a cup and a hat back there, but go check that out and support us. And until next week, we'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us on the My SGV podcast. Check out more of our content on our website, mysgv.net. This show was produced by Russell Mono and edited by Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. If you'd like to join us next week as we capture and share more stories from our diverse community, feel welcome.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.